know a number of you sitting here are familiar with some of his works from before One Woman, One Century. Some of you then probably also know that this film is somewhat different from his typical style. It's in a certain sense much calmer. On the other hand, it uses some distinct techniques that characterize his oeuvre. But before perhaps we turn to questions of style and approach, I just wondered if for the audience here, you could set up the context for the film a bit, both in terms of how you found Dragica, or how, as you said, she in fact was the one who found you, but also more pertinently perhaps, why did you think telling her story was so important today?
Good evening, and thank you very much for coming, and also for the patience, as the film is quite long and not too much full of dynamic. And thank, of course, Stanford University for inviting us, and you, Pavle, for hosting the whole event. Well, actually, you have seen that Dragica is very extraordinary, not only because her life was so long and full of tensions and struggles, but mostly because she is telling us her personal history, which is very much different of everything what we now listen and hear in ex-Yugoslavian post-socialistic countries, as each of those, I would say, new states is sort of inventing and rewriting the history. And many facts, what we have heard here, have been quite surprising and a great process of learning for all of us in the crew, and especially for the younger people who have been our editors and assistants. Just think of these very obvious facts she is telling us. In today's school books, everybody would say Serbian people and Croat people, they have been hating each other through the centuries. And now we have heard Dragica from Istria, she's a Croat and Catholic, how she was speaking about taking the refuge in late 20s, from Istria together with her brother where? In the middle of Belgrade. And in Belgrade, of course, which in today's school books between two wars was actually the city where the communists have been and leftists have been complete outcasts, and anti-fascists have been quite rare. Now we have heard that actually also ministers and some official people in the government and institutions have been very much against Hitler and fascism, and have been trying to help this organizing of anti-fascistic movement. Also, in socialistic time, when I was going to the school, we have been taught all the time that old anti-fascistic movement was only reserved for communists. So that you would never think that from some parts of upper class you would have support actually for this liberation movement. And that is this most obvious thing. So meeting Dragica and listening her story, I was really very much, I would say, encouraged when I see someone from our territory who does not lie about the past. And when we decided to make this material, of course, we shot it much longer. And this version, what you have seen, it is the version what we call a short one, because like the normal version lasts around 3 hours, and we made it, and it was shown on television in a 3 episodes.
And this
but we never expected when we finished the film that it would be sort of broadly received. But then finally, when the film started being shown first on premiere in Belgrade and Zagreb and then Ljubljana and other cities, Sarajevo, it was really shocking how the people reacted with great interest, how the media coverage was so great that actually I have heard many old journalists who told me that actually Dragica is the women with the greatest media coverage in the last 100 years, you see. So pages and pages came out of. Why? Because simple, the people start, I would say, being interesting to hear another side. And this side is sort of brought in a way which you in this country do know quite well, because I have found one actually edition which is called People's History of the United States. So I think the editor was Howard Zinn. So that is the method very much similar to this one.
That is the interview line. How did the trip to the parade in Moscow come about? And at what point did this become not just part of the film, but part of the shoot? And this part, in fact, this kind of second line of going to Moscow is in fact much more in line with your quote-unquote traditional approach, which is to say instigating events and putting real people in the role-playing situations. So what can you tell us about that aspect?
Well, you see, now you can imagine that as a filmmaker, when I was listening her long stories, and what was also very funny that she always would ask me, look, Zelimir, are we going to sit more than 1 hour? And I said, at least 3 hours, because we have so many things to say. And he always asked, let me break each half an hour for a cigarette, and each hour, and we should also open the bottle of wine, and we have to drink the wine, you see. So all these, what we now learn about smoking and drinking wine, actually, from her experience, is completely opposite than this what the doctors are now sort of proposing. Anyhow, I told her
in terms of her longevity.
Yes, yes. But of course, I said, Dragica, look, your story is great, and we are really interested to follow it. But I am afraid it's complicated to bring it on the screen, because we are just sitting and talking. And you have seen, she has difficulties in moving. She has 2 other problems. She does not hear well, you see, so you rare could film any dialogues with her, because the partner has to shout, and then she also does not have good eyes. So I said, Dragica, would you like that we make some excursion? And she said, yes, yes. I would love to go to my village, Sovinjak again, if it is possible. And then she said, and something what I would like very much, but I'm scared to tell you. And I said, what? She said, I would like to see Moscow again, you see. So when we heard that, of course, that for us, it was very inspiring to put another great topic, not only this this experience of hers, personal, and of her family and friends, but also this another topic, that is this topic of this whole idea, not only anti-fascism, Belgrade and so on, but the whole idea of communism in 20th century, which is absolutely very much linked to Soviet Union, to Lenin, to revolution. So I understood that her life is so excellent example for analyzing the hopes and dreams, and at the same time the dangerous side of state socialism and state communism, which was realized, I would say, not in these ideal Marxistic terms, but in these terms as it was done in Eastern Europe. And then she also brought something what for us living in Yugoslavia was absolutely not, I would say, known enough, and that is this aspect how, of course, the whole actually organization of European communist parties and Western and Eastern communist parties, of course, have been very much linked in cooperation and a sort of very tight links with not only the Soviet Union but also Cominterna, and how also this Second World War and phase of liberation of Eastern Europe from fascism, all the way through Yugoslavia, Hungary, Austria, up to Berlin, was actually mostly somehow successful due to these 25 million actually sacrificed Soviet soldiers. And of course, after the split, the sort of ideological quarrel between leadership of Tito and leadership of Stalin, all those topics have not been present in the school books in a time when our generation went through schools.
Her imprisonment, in fact, this is the moot point, or for a long time it used to be the moot point in the history of socialist Yugoslavia. But
now when we look back what was happening actually in the whole period of 5 decades of state socialism, especially after all those talks with Dragica and also some of the friends who have been around her, I understand actually many of these very brutal shifts in, I would say, system of values which have been somehow put through those states so easily. You see, so nowadays, as everybody knows, and I mean all those medias are writing how many former communists are now newborn Christian, how many of these communists who have been proclaiming war against the private property are now new tycoons. All those changes which could be, which are as brutal as maybe in the time of Napoleon, who became well known as a fighter for French Revolution and a general of French Revolution. After 10 years, proclaimed himself a king. So you can imagine what type of actually earthquake ran through the France at that time. But we, Serbia, ex-Yugoslav, newborn states, and also the whole Eastern Europe and Russia, we have the same type of very brutal changing of system values. And when we heard what was happening in the time when this clash between Tito's leadership and Stalin came, how brutal was actually oppression against everybody who did not just went in the official stream. Then we understand. Then we do understand how actually our people, especially those who have been ideologically very much linked to the state organization, how they have been somehow following the commands without sort of any practicing critique and defending their own opinion.
Okay, let's at this point see if there are any questions from the audience. Yes, please.
Yeah, I have a question because it's really interesting. I didn't expect actually to hear about that 1951 because my grandfather ended up, he died in Goliathok. Goliathok was I thought it was the only concentration camp for political prisoners who were somehow condemned because of saying something against Tito in favor of Stalin. I didn't know there were other concentration camps for political prisoners. Do you know how many were there?
Well, now you have very well recorded the whole situation with imprisonment of the people and the number and the names. So of course, beside Goliathok, there was about 3 different grades. Something was what they call the real imprisonment because of the judgment of the court, and something was some people went as they have been army officials, and the third group was the people who have been clerks in the state. For instance, Dragica was one who was working in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. So Goliathok have been the people who have been party leaders and military leaders. You see, and as we have, and the regime was very much similar all over the place. And what is the most, I would say, sad and problematic and inhuman was that actually the treatment of the prisoners was even worse than in Soviet gulags. And what we did not know, and now it is recorded in many testimonies, that actually the people who went through gulag, they have not been put in the situation to sort of somehow practice pressure against the companions. You see, you have had in Soviet gulags the guards who have been guarding the people, and the inmates have been treated as really prisoners. But here you have some sort of really very inhuman ideological and psychological pressure, plus, of course, physical torturing. So altogether, there was at least 5 or 6 those prisons, which are not so very well known, but as I'm living in Novi Sad, that is Vojvodina, we have heard about one very brutal, which was near Pančevo, you see, and very poor recorded before. But you can find now quite a few books, around 20, 30 books, which very in each detail with the more or less all the names. Around 30,000 people have been in prison.
Any further questions? Yes, in the back, please.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for joining us. But my question is that in the film we hear Drogica telling her story in her voice. My question to you is,
Your question is who else?
Yeah, who else does Drogica speak for besides her own story?
U čije ime još govori osim u svoje?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and it was also something what we have been very curious when the film went publicly. So, on screening in the big cities, always the many organizations of survived comrades from those prisons came, not only they as personalities, but also like organization. So I was asking myself how they will react, because Dragica, she always came to speak to the audience, and she was very direct. She said in Zagreb, look, now I'm now in Zagreb, and I hear how many of people of ours are speaking that actually we did not have a collaboration during the Second World War. Why we lie ourselves? We all know who have been for Hitler and who was engaged even in Hitler's units and so on. And then she also addressed her colleagues and compatriots and comrades. She said, look, I see some of the friends, men and women, who have been serving the same jail with us. Why some of us are lying that we have been in that time not for Stalin and for socialism, but now when our delegation are going to Moscow, they first go to the churches and go to kiss the hands of patriarch and so on. That is a shame. They said we should stay like on the
True to their position.
truth to the position and so on. And I thought that it will maybe trigger some sort of misunderstanding, quarrels among them. But no, they now have taken the Serbian, Montenegro's, Croatian group of organization of those prisoners have taken her as like a most prominent member. And so last November, just a year ago, she was celebrating the 100 years birthday. So Sarita and I and some friends, we went in her apartment thinking, okay, let's bring the flowers and so on. So it was 10 o'clock in the morning. By 12 o'clock, about 50 people came. And another 100 have been announced that they're coming as groups. So we had to change to go downstairs to the restaurant. So at 2 o'clock, there was about almost 200 people from various parts of the ex-Yugoslavian territories, and they have been coming with the speeches and praising her and so on. So I would say that, I mean, what I did not know and what we did not intend, and we did not have much sort of collaboration or any connection or communication with those groups, but in the end, she is now speaking for this, I would say, pre-Second War leftist and anti-fascist.
Okay, time for one more question if there are any. Yes, in the back, please.
It seems to me that the emphasis of the movie of the film is on World War II and what happened in the 50s in a Titoist political persecution of his ideological enemies. So I was wondering if that's the result of the editing of the movie, or was that the emphasis of her story? Is that the highlight of her life, or was that the result of the varsity cut?
Naglasak je na Drugom svjetskom ratu i naglasak na Drugom svjetskom ratu i informbirom periodu.
li je to knjiga sa po njenoj priči ili je to posljedica montaže?
That is her story. And of course, we all felt that actually, although we are speaking about 100 years of her life, about 40 years she's not mentioning. She's not mentioning this time when she, not much speaking about the time when she came out of prison. That was in 55, 56, and her husband also. So of course, then I asked her, I would like to know what was happening there, and then, of course, that story is not dramatic, but we have been recording it. She and her husband, together with all the people who went through those prisons and jails, they could not normally continue working in some offices or schools, so they have mostly had a very quiet and life as pensioners. And Dragica and her husband, they went in the village on the seaside in Montenegro, where the husband has a family house. So they continue mostly to live a very modest life, starting the tourist business there, and then, of course, step by step, they start again having the contact with these old friends, but not with many of them, just a few, and the life absolutely was more quiet. When I say that we have a longer version, so in this version, what I say that it is almost 3 hours, we do have about half an hour, maybe 40 minutes about all those things what have been just her life after the prison sentence.
Thank you, Zelimir. Thank you all for coming.